And now let's move to another country, the country that is the pioneer in wind and having very high shares of wind power, and that is Denmark, which was also the first European country that started to introduce wind on a commercial scale already in the 1980s. And I have the pleasure that we have with us here Tonny Brink, who works with the Folkecenter, which is a center which is working like an NGO in Denmark, starting to spread already long ago, renewable energy technology and how it works. Tonny, and we know that Denmark has also a lot to show, practical experience of how to integrate wind energy and access wind power, working, of course, making use of the connections that Denmark has to other countries, but also doing a lot on the local level. Tonny, I look forward to your presentation. And
yes, thank you, Stefan.
A warm welcome to Northern Denmark.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, and thank you for inviting us to this webinar that you're hosting. And I have a special greeting for all of you from our founder, Preben Megaard, who also happens to be the founder of World Wind Energy Association. So therefore, he's especially glad that we are part of this webinar.
Thank you. Please give Preben our best regards.
I will, for sure. He himself is very sad that he can't join the webinar, but he will see it later. So he'll look at the recordings later.
Excellent.
Yes, but let's start. Oh, never mind that first picture. The first picture was just an old Dutch turbine where to tell a little bit about energy communities, and we have a tradition of building cooperatives, both in all kinds, in all different ways. But we built a lot of energy cooperatives over the years, starting with very old Dutch turbines, going into grocery, going into slaughterhouses, and lately going into wind turbines. And this is the way we become world leading in wind power. So starting in the 70s. But what I mostly want to pay attention to in this slide is that in the 1980s, we took a decision of not allowing conventional power stations to be built, just producing electricity. I won't use so much time on explaining the history of Danish wind energy, because I think all the audience know the Danish concept and the Danish way of promoting wind. But what I want to raise awareness of in this slide is mainly that in the late 90s and early 2000, we start having these acceptance problems that bigger companies got interested in using the wind and getting an economy in wind, especially the utilities, and therefore these utilities very fast moved offshore, maybe even before the technology was mature to go offshore. So some of the lesson learned from some of the companies, especially Vestas building Horns Reef 1, used a lot of money on that experience. But moving offshore, they were also sure, these big companies like Dong and Vattenfall, that they could have it for themselves. So there the consumer part was taken away from it. This resistance can easily be seen in the number of turbines being installed in Denmark recently, because especially when you look on onshore, which is the dark green color, it has come to mostly a complete stop. You can see in 2019 we installed 4 turbines only onshore and nobody offshore. But as you can see on the plot, our offshore is also based on the long process of planning offshore parks and building them. So they will come in lots, like this graph is showing, that we built in 13, and in 18 here we commercialized Horns Reef 3. and also the same in capacity. But when we look at this graph here in capacity, where we're close to 6,000 megawatt, then we have just taken the decision of doubling that. We have taken the decision by the government earlier this month to more than double our wind capacity, so that by offshore we'll add another 6 gigawatt on top of it with some energy islands. Looking on the country level and the energy covered with wind, then we are at 47% today. Even in 2020, we are probably a little higher. But if you add PV on top of it, we are way above 50% of the electricity share. But looking at the general renewable share in energy and total consumption, then it's a little scaring that even this high percentage of wind only lifts us to 8% of our total energy consumption. And but luckily that we have a tradition of district heating. We are above 40% today on total renewable energy share. And the reason for doing that is that we have as I said, a long tradition. It's even older than our wind tradition, or just as old. But our first district heating plant started in 1903, and today 70% of all homes is covered with district heating. So it's natural to penetrate this district heating with a lot of wind. But I was informed that you would like to hear something about mainly on combined heat and power, which is also relevant. We have this huge storage in our district heating facilities. So it's still the cheapest way to store energy that's in water, and due to that we have the whole country covered with district heating, then it's natural to use water as storage. And that was what was decided in 1980s, was that before 1980 we had 100% fuel intake, and then we only used 40% of it for electricity. And after 1980 we used 100%, but then we used the 50% of it district heating, and the 10% was only lost. Today these 10% is actually recovered by heat pumps. So some of the installations, they run with efficiency more than 100% due to that they have been rebuilt according to the regular design, and then this way they have lifted the efficiency to above 100%. But decentralized, the CSP, came along with our national gas grid. We are so lucky in Denmark that by being an oil exporting company, we also had to take uses of the gas. So we decided already in the 80s also to build a national gas grid. And this gas grid we are using, of course, for heating individual homes and factories, and for industrial purposes. But we also used it for running gas engines in the decentralized combined heat and power facilities, and that was obtained by Preben Megard, who has a nose for new technologies, and he discovered that Germany was quite advanced in these small gas engines on hospitals and so on. So they made a study tour to Germany and managed to get the Danish government to accept and give an extra high feed-in for electricity produced on combined heat and power installations. And this way we got usage of our natural gas coming from our oil fields and being oil exporting, and then at the same time got electricity when we were not having wind, because with this high high penetration of wind, we were beginning to shut down central power stations. And these power stations, as in those days where we used direct coupled turbines, were not pleased with only delivering the reactive power for these direct coupled machines. And that was also one of the reasons for going to the next step that our previous speakers talked about with synchronous machines and permanent magnet generators, where you don't have to deliver the reactive power. But these local combined heat and power stations, we built close to 700 of them, and but they are very, very challenged today with this high penetration of wind, pressing the energy prices. So today they are barely surviving. Many of them are actually being exported out of the country, and they have had a lot of challenges over the years. It all started with in 90, where the first one was built, where they had a subsidy where there was 1.3 euro cent on top of the electricity price to run the CHP, but due to the lower energy prices, it was not feasible to keep the combined heat and power stations running, especially in the period where they had negative power. Then they both had to pay for getting rid of the electricity and had to for using the heat for the end consumers. And this year, 2019, was the last year where they were paid for being backup for when we were not having wind. And then this capitalization and privatization of the district heating industry is still going on. There's still a lot of talk about whether it should be capitalized and privatized. But what we have seen from going from being privatized and back to consumer owned, a lot of these district heating plants actually saved 20% of the consumer's money and lowered the prices on heat with 20% compared to when they were private owned. And that fits very well with the interest rates from commercial companies. But it's a way of placing your money when you have negative interest rates in countries and you want to do some investments instead of having the money in the bank. So currently the Danish CHP units are being exported. They're being sold to mostly Eastern Europe. I think it's a shame and it's too early, at least 5 years too early. We haven't seen the earning from mostly hydrogen or methane directly made out of wind. And so due to that, I think it could be feasible to still have those old combustion engines eating some hydrogen as dual fuel. The problem is that these old machines cannot run on hydrogen. They would be ruined if they were running on hydrogen. So it has to be in some kind of mixture with natural gas. So due to that, we are exporting all these CHP units. We become more and more vulnerable for periods for not having electricity enough. Today we are depending on our neighbors we are lacking close to 16% of our electricity consumption. So that's what we are importing, and that's also one of the changes. The changes is that earlier, before where we had the backup power, we also had a policy saying that we would be 100% covered by ourselves. But that has also been changed by the government. But today these combined heat and power plants that are still running, they have joined forces and built a network where they work as aggregator, and they want to sell as soon as the energy prices is above 400 Danish kroner per megawatt hour, then they'll deliver the backup. So that's a way of survival due to that the consumer still needs heat, so sometimes they have to run. Excess power. Now, this is an old example from 15 where it was 139%. It's extremely high. I'll later show you what 2019 is like. But we're still talking about an optimized model where we use especially gas. Today, most of all these CSP units, they are converted to biomass due to that we have no tax on biomass due to we look upon biomass as being CO2 neutral. There's a lot of discussion with when we use this amount of biogas and biomass and we import a lot, then is it still sustainable, or are we chopping down trees all over the world to supply us with biomass and wooden pellets? Some legislation has been changed in order to make sure that this biomass is sustainable. But we're still aiming to go towards power to X, power to gas, and to upgrade some of our biogas. We have more and more biogas installations built, also supplying district heating, but also supplying electricity. And if we can upgrade these with hydrogen, we will take some care of a lot of the CO2. Then we can make sure that the CO2 reduction is in place. But going back to the fluctuation in our wind energy, this is how it looked last year from when we had one single peak on 139% in 2015. Then last year you can see how many times we are above 100%. And when we want to, the latest governmental issue is to aim for 70% reduction according to 1990 in CO2. Then we have decided to build 2 energy islands. One is the island of Bornholm, and the other one is an artificial energy island. And in combination with these 2 islands, we'll add another 6 gigawatt of wind. So that will really raise this bar of when at what wind speed we will reach 100% coverage. So therefore, it's just to make sure that we have the right setup, and therefore, in connection with these islands, there will be built some hydrogen stations to make power to gas. And this is actually the curve that we have decided to follow. The decision is already taken to aim for 70% reduction, and that means that that even though we have over the last 27 years reduced a lot and installed a lot of wind capacity, then we are only halfway. We have to move twice as fast for the next 13 years. So that is not done by wind alone. So we have to change our building mass. We have to change our way of transporting with electrical vehicles. Currently, we have 20,000 electric vehicles, so that goes awful slow. The government is aiming to have 1 million in 2030, but the automotive industry believe that if we have 250,000, we are lucky. So they need some kind of carrot to change the Danes' attitude towards electric vehicles and charging opportunities. Yes, I think that was more or less it. Folkecenter, you're always welcome to visit us. We are constantly working on renewable and still believe in achieving 100% towards renewable. And then beside being an NGO, we test wind and solar. Yes, I think that helped you get back on track with the time schedule. So I think that's it for us now.
Very good. Thank you so much, Tony. That I think was a very good and also very practical presentation of how Denmark is doing it with the different challenges and ways that you're doing this in Denmark. And again, please give our best regards to Preben. Indeed, he's the founding president of the World Wind Energy Association. And of course, also to your current director, to his wife, Jane, who actually suggested that you could speak about the Danish experience here. So we're very happy to have you here. So I think I'm looking at the time. I don't think that we should extend this session much longer because we are already more than half an hour beyond what we were originally planning for. I have seen many questions, of course, here, and many of them there's been a lot of interaction, which I'm also happy about. What I would suggest is that those of you who still have questions, that you please write. Also, you can also send us an email and we can forward it to the speakers and request them to answer the questions. As I mentioned before, as I've written this here, we will make the full webinar available on, well, you follow our website and you will find the link to, it will later be a YouTube recording, like you'll find all the presentations of our previous webinars. What we're doing is that we will not just put the whole webinar of 2.5 hours, but every speaker, every speech will be a separate file so that it will be easier to access. I'm sure that many people will be interested. We had now, I think the maximum number here was more than 80 people. We had in addition people who watched the live stream, which was in parallel live streamed on Facebook. So I'm sure we have many people who are interested in this. This is, of course, the discussion at this point of time, and it's very interesting to see how dynamic it is. In this sense, I think we could show how different the approaches are. Even within one country, you have different ways of having the discussion and how to address the integrated systems. Thank you again very much from my side. Thank you, Jami. Thank you, Professor Heyer. Thank you, Mr. Agrawal. Thank you, Roland Rösch. I think he's left already. Ms. Chang and Tony, Cameron Potter. Thank you to all of you for contributing, I would say, very excellent presentations, all of you. And we certainly stay in touch. And yeah, we'll continue discussing this very, very important topic. This now also is the end of our webinar series before the summer break. We're now going into summer break and we will restart the webinars in the second half of August. We'll send you all, of course, notification once this is starting again. One day that has already been fixed is middle of September, a webinar about education and training, which of course is also related to the topic that we're discussing here. And yeah, so with this, we come to the end. Thank you to everyone. Have a good night, have a nice evening, have a nice day, or if you come from the Western Hemisphere, have a wonderful morning and the rest of the remaining day. Thank you and goodbye to everyone.